The Burj Khalifa is compared to this Trump Tower right here. Just take Trump Tower and put another Trump Tower on top of it, and that is your Burj Khalifa height, essentially. It is absolutely massive. I've seen it in person, luckily enough. Now, one of the things I like to do with my tours is point out mistakes architects make in their multi-million-dollar buildings, because they do, and it happens often. Here for Trump Tower, take a look to the right-hand side. Trump Tower, you got these commercial spaces here along the river. They're all empty. Why is that? Because they were not built to code. The ceiling heights are too low for commercial there, so all that space is wasted money. Trump Tower loses millions of dollars a year because they're not able to use any of that space. They just use it for storage. Huge mistake on their part. Still a pretty building, but up here on the right-hand side, we're going to stick to the right most of the time. This black box, American Medical Association building. This was the last building designed by Mies van der Rohe before father of modernism, and he came here, minimal ornamentation, and just the bare bones of the building, just a steel frame glass, and that's all he believed a building should have. Now, Mies van der Rohe came from Germany in the 1930s to Chicago to practice architecture and also teach architecture. He loved teaching his students the less is more philosophy, and you'll see a lot of that here in Chicago. But you know, some students do not like to listen to their professors, and I agree with that sometimes. So one of those students became quite successful, and he's one of my favorite architects. Is here on the right-hand side. These are, you're probably checking them out, the Chicago Core. Goldberg, who is a student of Mies van der Rohe, the guy who believed that less is more. He clearly did not agree with his professor. He had his own philosophy. His philosophy was that there are no right angles in nature, so that there should be no right angles in architecture. Just curves, 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 and more curves. That's all he did. And he created these in the 1960s. The Marina City Towers were designed to be a city within a city. They had everything you needed. That's because in the 1960s, downtown was not as friendly to residents as it used to be. It was filled with a lot of factories still, a lot of warehouses, didn't have a lot of amenities that people might need when living here. So they had their own supermarket, their own roller rink, their own cinema, all that inside the Marina City Towers. Of course, the marina hits the name.
Sorry, my block.
And extremely tough. It scares me as much as it scares you. That's my first, I'll let you know, that's the first time I've been scared, and I just got back on the boat this season. But anyway, that's the Marina City Towers. Some of my favorite buildings. I'll point out my favorite ones, they're very particular. But we're going to move on. Next building, here on the right, what you would have seen next to the Chicago River, just warehouses. So this was originally a food storage warehouse, now turned to commercial space and restaurants, which is adaptive reuse, which is good, and then we get to preserve some history at the same time. Now count the bays of windows to the right of the clock tower, and then after that count the bays of windows to the left. You're going to count 6 bays on the right, and if you're good at math, you'll count 5 bays on the left. That entire building is asymmetrical. That's because this bridge we're going underneath right now was built around 15 years. Each of that building has that makes it so environmentally friendly is that in the summer it uses river water pumped underneath the ground into the building, using it to cool the building, saving on HVAC fees and all that fun stuff. Right here on the right is the granddaddy of all warehouses, is what the tour guides like to call it. This is the Merchandise Mart, a beautiful Art Deco building and the second largest concrete building in the country. The first largest, can anybody guess? It's the Pentagon. That is the largest concrete building in the country. This was the largest until the Pentagon was put up. It's an Art Deco design. It has 4.2 million square feet of space, and it has over 8 miles of hallway, given its own postal code. It was made by the Marshall Field Company. They're the ones who paid for it. It was a consolidation of 14 warehouses. So they have 14 warehouses. They just wanted one, so they made that. Absolutely massive. Just a huge building. Now here on the right, we got some new shiny buildings. These are the buildings of Wolf Point. So this is Wolf Point East we're passing now. And this is Salesforce Tower. I had about 50 of their employees on my tour about 2 tours ago. And they're pretty nice people, but you know salespeople, they're very chatty, you know what I mean? So they're all from here, very proud of this building. It's like mostly completed, there's still some construction on it. It's river. So this is where the main branch, which is what we were just on, meets the north branch up to the right-hand side, and we're going down the south branch right now. Now this part of town is pretty historic. This is where the first settlers of Chicago were. Our first general store, our first 3 taverns, our first residents all lived here at the junction of the Chicago rivers. very popular spot to be. Our first post office would have been right about here to our left with this little structure that has the lights on either side. That's about where the post office was back in the day. Now the next building is here on the right hand side. This is 150 North Riverside. It has a really skinny base. A lot of people refer to it as the upside down building or the Y-shaped building. Now the reason for this skinny base is according to Chicago code. You on the other side of the building, railroad tracks run underneath the ground, and they limit where you can put a foundation. So this foundation here is only 40 feet wide, about 1/3 the width of the roof of the building. It uses these steel beams that are constructed in Luxembourg from some of the strongest steel that can be created by men at the moment. And those are shipped from Luxembourg to the US to help hold up that side of the building out of that design. And I'll explain more about it later. Next one coming up, this is 150 North Riverside. This building, and we got a south side. That is the shorter side coming up on the right. So with this building, it was home to Boeing for a while. I think they've moved out. I need to double check that. But this building is an engineering marvel. It is designed by Perkins and Will from 1990. And here on the right, this right side of the building, running underneath the ground are railroad switching tracks. Now these switching tracks underneath that building with the limited space, if we look back at it, there's nothing time I'll make you look backwards, I promise. If you look back up at it, you can see a big X brace. That big X brace is one of 5 trusses that is holding up that western corner of that building over those railroad tracks, suspending it, holding it from the top. You could essentially run your hand underneath that side of the building thanks to that truss. Very impressive stuff. Now we're passing now on the right. This is 2 North Riverside Plaza. This was the first public plaza in the city, and it made it extremely popular to have public plazas because it's quite controversial when I need to. The other line that uses this is Amtrak. Amtrak connects Chicago to the rest of the U.S. Chicago is the railroad capital and train. In the 1900s, these are pretty simple, modern style. You think they're by Mies van der Rohe, but they're by his students. So there's that less is more philosophy. You got a glass bar. And the only ornamentation on these buildings are the steel I-beams you can lightly see between the windows. That's the only ornamentation. So I can understand why. So those 2 black buildings we just passed are Gateway 1 and Gateway Tower. Same guys. They were by Skidmore, Owings and Merrill. They built a lot of skyscrapers. Big international firm. Lots of great architects that worked there. Lots of great architects that quit from there. You know how today. Here it is right in front of us. There we go. That is the Willis Tower officially. But if you're from Chicago, or at least you live here, it's the Sears Tower. It is 110 floors. It is 1,454 feet tall. And it is an all-steel frame construction. It was built in 1974 by none other than Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, the same guys who build everything. 1974, it was the tallest building in the world. It remained the tallest building in the world for 24 years up until the 1990s. It was quite something. The principal architect was Bruce Graham, and the engineer was Dr. Fazlur Khan. Is that they were out to lunch one day, and that Bruce Graham is a smoker. And they say that when they were out at lunch, they were discussing how they were going to build such a tall building. They say Bruce Graham took out a cigarette. Dr. Fazlur Khan got the idea, grabbed the cigarettes, took a couple of them, bundled them together. The Sears Tower, I'm going to call it that. The Sears Tower is not one skyscraper. It is 9 skyscrapers bundled together on a 3x3 grid. Concrete technology and the mixing techniques have all improved vastly. So